Hello everybody, it's your friendly digital technology librarian, Christy here. We've reached another Friday, so, of course, I have another Film Rec Friday ready for everybody out there. Anyway, it is the very first Friday of October, and you know what that means. Scary season has arrived. So I'm pretty much a massive fan of fall in general. I love all the Burr months, but October is my absolute favorite month because this is the time of year when everybody is looking for a really good scary story, whether we're talking about movies, TV series, books, short stories. It's just that time of year. So it feels like I've been studying up the entire course of the year because I am such a massive fan of the horror film genre in general. And then there's so many subgenres. There are scary stories for everyone. Today, we are kicking off our month of scary story recommendations with 2 television series that are available to you entirely for free with the use of your library card via our streaming services. So without any further ado, let's get to the recs. Okay, for my first recommendation, this one I think is one that even people who aren't huge fans of the horror genre might at least be familiar with the base property, and that's The Walking Dead. So, of course, The Walking Dead was originally a graphic novel. Legion of fans, very dedicated, very loyal. A number of years ago, AMC picked up the rights and developed a television series, and The Walking Dead was massively popular, like massively. A lot of people who were not horror fans really like this show. It's very humanizing. It's a really interesting group of characters that you get to meet. And the TV series just recently ended and now has spawned a number of spin-offs. And I was super excited to discover that on Hoopla, season 1 of The Walking Dead, Daryl Dixon is now available. So Daryl Dixon's spinoff is one of the best lauded, both critically and by audiences alike. It does, in fact, tell a really fascinating story about Daryl Dixon post the Walking Dead series, and it's one of those that, even for someone like me, okay, so I stopped watching The Walking Dead when a couple of my favorite characters exited the show. To avoid spoilers, we're not going to go into any of that, but all I did, and that was several seasons before the base series ended. All I did was quickly read a couple of summaries about the last season of The Walking Dead to sort of figure out where the Daryl Dixon character was, and I had absolutely zero problems jumping into this spinoff. I did not need to go back and rewatch the whole series. I did not need to watch the last couple of seasons. I just did like a little brush up so I could kind of get a vague idea of what was going on with him. And the writing and the acting is strong enough within this season 1 of Walking Dead Daryl Dixon to really grab you very quickly. I do think if you've no familiarity whatsoever with the show, it would certainly have some challenges just because beyond not knowing the Daryl character, you'd also kind of need to figure out like the different mythologies about Walking Dead they're out there, and there wouldn't be as much impact. So I will say you should probably have some vague familiarity with the television series. That said, this was such a fun show. I really liked what they did. There are no spoilers beyond what goes in the synopsis for this show. We meet Daryl again when he kind of washes up on the shores of France. We don't obviously know what's happened, but neither does Daryl. So we're sort of piecing together what has gone on and how he gets to where he is. And along the way, and how he can get back. That's the other thing. The whole goal and quest for a long while is just how does he get back home? And we meet a ton of really compelling characters. Like, this was surprisingly easy to just fall back into because, again, it'd been several years since I'd been watching The Walking Dead. So I was a little bit skeptical. I'd never been even like the biggest Daryl Dixon fan. He was a character expressly created for the TV series. but I didn't dislike the character either. And I found this really, really easy to fall into and very compelling. There are several characters who I found myself gravitating toward just as much as the Daryl character. That's how strong they were. So even though I'd had this storied history with this character, I'd watched the different changes over the years. These others are so well built that even if you don't have immediately all that knowledge of backstory and familiarity with anything else beyond what we're immediately seeing, there's still stuff to latch onto. So season 1 is 6 episodes long. Very, very fast watch. Very fast watch. You will probably want to set aside a little chunk of time to binge it because it is one that you want to keep going with. And season 2 is currently airing. It just started. So that's one of those things where if you want to brush up or if you want to dive in, this is like a really great time to do so because you have, of course, like this freebie ability to see if the show would be something you want to invest, time and effort into, watching every week. But I definitely think it is because it really is quite a well done show. I was surprised, honestly, how much I liked it. I will certainly be watching season 2, and it does look like Hoopla does briefly get the rights to the Walking Dead spinoffs. We had seen the spinoff with Negan and Maggie last year. Now we're seeing the Daryl one. I'm hoping that we get the Rick and Michonne, but it is not yet available, nor it may not be. But definitely keep visiting Hoopla to see. Just type in The Walking Dead and all of the current Walking Dead properties on the site will pop up. And the trajectory certainly implies that we would. So fingers crossed. Pre-recommendation, if you have not seen the Rick and Michonne spinoff, highly recommended. Anyway, again, if you are not even a huge horror fan, I still think The Walking Dead is one of those shows because there's so much drama and there's so much action and adventure. Like it really, I think, for me anyway, reads more of an action adventure series than it does a horror story. It just has horror elements because of course there's zombies and things trying to kill each other, but like it at the heart of everything, I still think more of this compelling, just post-apocalyptic adventure story. So if you happen to be more into those kinds of stories rather than the horror genre, this is certainly for you. For people who do like horror, there's plenty of that going on. And you, again, don't have to be one of those folks who stuck with The Walking Dead all the way through. I was not. And I still absolutely adored this spinoff. So lots of people will really, I think, enjoy this. So definitely give it a chance. Again, available on Hoopla, season 1 of The Walking Dead, Daryl Dixon. Okay, my other recommendation for today is available via Canopy, and that is 2005's season 1 of Masters of Horror. So Masters of Horror is not a traditional narrative TV series. Rather, it's an anthology series. Season 1 consists of 13 hour-long horror films directed by some of the most famous horror directors in the industry. These are guys who have a number of really, really critically and audience-lauded films. They are cult favorite directors. They are auteurs who sort of changed the genre over the years. These are the guys that you want to see doing like small experimental films. I will say, for people who are not really into horror, this one might not be the best series because this is one of those places where some of these guys really, really go out and try some very, very different things than they are normally used to doing. They also like to push the envelope. This series is quite graphic. So if you like lighter horror or if you're not really a horror fan, again, this one you may want to pass on. But if you are a horror fan, if you are somebody who likes seeing the way that a director with a particular vibe can shift and change when he doesn't have all the constraints of like a big, big film, this is a really, really interesting project. I am very familiar with a number of these directors' work. I like am a huge fan of some of them, and watching this like hour-long project film that they some of them have put together has been like really eye-opening about what they are potentially trying to do or how they might want to change direction tonally. Um, I didn't love every single one of these 13 short films, but I did think that each one of them was really interesting in their own way. Uh, Again, huge horror fan, so I'm one of those people who likes to look into like previous works and how a piece fits in with somebody's filmography. There were a number of directors who were part of this, like Dario Argento, John Carpenter, Larry Cohen, Don Coscarelli, Joe Dante, Stuart Gordon, Toby Hooper, John Landis. I mean, these are some ridiculously big name directors, whether we're talking about the horror genre or not. Like, these guys are epic. And so some of the stories, I was really surprised by what they put together. Like, the guy who did the Gremlin movies, you wouldn't think that a director who put that together would necessarily go off into sort of like a political satire horror film, but that's what we get to see. Toby Hooper was another one that was sort of a standout simply because, so Hooper's work is one that's kind of interesting for me. Like, while I can appreciate where it was in the genre, I was never a huge fan of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I get it. Like, I understand why it was such a big deal when it came out, but it was never a film that really like did a whole lot for me as a fan of horror films. Poltergeist, on the other hand, I still have a hard time being in a room with a staticky TV, even a staticky radio. It like gives me flashbacks to being a kid and watching this movie. And his Dance of the Dead was probably one of my favorite of the films they made for this. Like, I did not go into it expecting to really feel anything or have strong feelings about it, but it was really solid. Don Coscarelli's was another one that he sort of kicked everything off with a story that had a lot of twists and turns in it. I'm generally not more into like just blood, guts, and gore. I prefer like supernatural stories and sort of like folktale based. So the slasher genre isn't generally my thing, but like he wove in a lot of unexpected twists to his, and that really made it quite interesting for me. John Carpenter's short, which is called Cigarette Burns, that was another one that really threw me for a loop. It definitely feels very much like a John Carpenter horror movie, like for me anyway, like with The Fog, The Thing, those big ones from the past, like the way he tied certain supernatural elements into the base story of his like 60-minute short. Sidebar, John Carpenter's story also had like some serious ties to other pieces of work that he's done, which is just really interesting. Anyway, if you happen to be a big fan of horror films in general, I strongly recommend checking this one out. For me, it's more about like the exercise of sort of seeing how all of these directors shift when they put something like this smaller work together. And I really enjoyed that aspect of it. Again, I wasn't a massive fan of all 13 of these stories, but I did really like the process that I went through. If you are someone like me who happens to be really interested in the genre, if you've watched a lot of like the big lauded horror films, or even if you haven't, like I do think that would also be a really interesting kind of eye-opening experience to see these 60-minute works completely unaware of who is putting them together and how that sort of plays into it too, you know. Definitely check this one out. Again, They're only an hour long, so they're pretty fast watches. Just be aware of what you're getting into. A lot of them are quite dark, quite graphic. So if that's not your jam, this might again not be for you. But if you do love horror in general, make sure you check it out. Again, available on Canopy, Masters of Horror Season 1. Okay, so those were my 2 recommendations for this week. If you happen to have any horror TV shows that you would like to recommend to fans, definitely share those in the comments, please. I know I am always looking for a good scary story recommendation. I am, again, super excited about all of this whole month. If you have any recommendations for future themes, or if there's a particular horror theme that you'd like us to check into, please pop that in the comments as well. As always, thank you so much for joining me. This has been a delightful way to kick off the spooky season. Again, thanks for joining me, and hopefully I will see you next week. Bye-bye.